Good afternoon. Today I'm looking forward to doing something a little bit different than what I've been doing with the interviews on this channel. And it's actually what I really wanted to do, the thing I'm most excited about, and that is interview people from other groups, not just former Jehovah's Witnesses, but people who have left other groups and have had a similar experience, to kind of show there's a common thread that runs through all of these groups. And so with that in mind, today I would like to introduce you to Danne Oberg. Am I saying your name right?
Yeah, you're saying it correct.
Okay. Danne, would you tell us what group you've come out of?
Alright, so the group that I came out with, they consider themselves to be a form of the Way of Yahweh. The best way to explain it would be a sacred name group, if you are familiar with that, because their emphasis is really on the proper pronunciation of Yahweh and Yahushua, and you can't err on any of the pronunciation, so it's technically a sacred name group if you ask me.
Yeah, I kind of think of Jehovah's Witnesses actually as a sacred name group too, because they put so much importance on using the name Jehovah. But I know that the group you came out of rejects the name Jehovah.
Yes.
As well as Jesus.
Exactly. They go great length to disprove a lot of names that are used to describe our Creator and Savior. So.
Okay. What else can you tell me about them? What else makes them different from other Christian groups?
So here's what's really unique about them. And I guess it's not unique if you consider other cults as well, but they claim to be the 144,000 that's described in Scripture, that they are the chosen remnant of Yahweh, and that they are set apart from any other part of Christianity, any other religion, and only they know the truth. And so if you're in that group, you are considered what they call a Yahudi, and everybody else is in error, but you are the ones who have the truth.
Gotcha.
And only you have the truth.
Gotcha. And they refer to the group as the Way of Yahweh?
Yes.
There was another name that when we talked earlier that you said that they go by.
So I want to kind of clarify a little bit. The term the Way or the Way of Yahweh actually goes back thousands of years. So they kind of use that title and apply it to themselves. So that's what they go by. But they consider themselves the Convocation of Yahweh Yahushua. So
I looked up that word, and it means a large formal assembly of people.
Yes.
Convocation. I had never heard that. I mean, I don't know why they can't just call it the Assembly of Yahweh. Why it has to be convocation. I think that there are groups like this like to take ownership of those lesser known words. Like Jehovah's Witnesses would never use the word church. It's always got to be congregation. And the place they worship is not a church, it's a kingdom hall. Yeah. So I think that groups like this like to do that. It's part of kind of loading the language, because if you can change the way a person speaks, change the meaning of words, or change the way they frame things with language, you can change the way they think. I mean, I think that's really key to kind of that indoctrination process.
Exactly, and I just want to mention briefly too that when you use different terms like convocation, you could have used congregation,
right.
You could have used assembly, these other things. When you use specific words, I think it's a way to subconsciously set yourself apart from other groups.
Right.
So when you hear the word convocation, okay, you automatically assume it's this group because they're the only ones who say this, And there's something I want to mention just briefly, if I could, about the language control. So, and I find this kind of humorous now, but at the time it was kind of frustrating. You're not allowed to use certain words in that group, such as you're not allowed to use the word the sun when referring to the big bright star that gives us daylight.
Okay.
And you're not allowed to say lucky, you're not allowed to say church, You're not allowed to say a lot of things.
Yeah, Lucky and Church are off limits with Jehovah's Witnesses too.
Yeah, and so they control your language, and they try and basically reconstruct your mind with different words, and so it's like almost like relearning everything, and that's part of the brainwashing, because you have to, if you're going to brainwash someone, you have to get them to relearn everything, to redo everything. You know, it's kind of like the military. You break them down and build them up. And
Exactly.
That's what
it's just like that. The difference with the military, I don't know if you're familiar with Stephen Hassan.
I'm not.
So Stephen Hassan wrote a book called Combating Cult Mind Control, as well as Freedom of Mind, and one other book. And he actually compares cults to the military. He says that one of the big differences is that when you go into the military, you go in with full informed consent. You know exactly what you're getting into. I mean, when you go into boot camp, you know it's about breaking you down and rebuilding you. Whereas when you join a group like this, it's much more insidious. You don't realize that's what's going to be happening. And as it's happening, you don't even realize it's happening, that reprogramming process. So it's much more unethical when a group like this does it than when the military does it, regardless of what you think of the military.
Exactly, yeah.
Let's see, what else? Was there anything in the doctrine that was designed to control your behavior? Anything that you had to change about the way you lived?
Yeah. So just to touch briefly on a few things here, one of the main doctrines in there is the truth about marriage. If you go to the website, and I don't know if you're going to put the website in the description.
I will, yeah.
Okay, so people can go and check it out. And, no, I'm not making this stuff up.
Right.
There's one section in there about the truth about marriage where it basically uses scripture to say that you're not allowed to date anybody who is a non-believer. And another thing it goes on to talk about is it uses 1 Corinthians, I believe, 1 Corinthians 7 about marriage. But actually, so the key things are you're not allowed to date or be with anyone who's a non-believer. You're not allowed to necessarily really fellowship with anyone who's a non-believer. Like, you can't truly be friends with your family or friends or coworkers because they're in darkness. They're not true believers, you know.
So you can have acquaintances, but you don't really make close friends out of them. And if your family isn't a member, they're still family, but not somebody you'd be close to.
Yeah, and so you can still interact with other people and let them and be kind, but you can't truly get on that level with them like you can with the people of the group.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so a non-believer in their eyes would be anybody who's not in this specific way.
Yeah, even Christians are considered non-believers, right? And the funny thing is they consider Christianity to be part of spiritual Israel, which is technically the same thing. We're all brothers and sisters, but they're not true believers. So if you were to marry a Christian, you're marrying somebody who's not a true believer, so that still goes against the teachings.
Right.
Yet they're still considered Israel. It's I don't know, it's beyond me, man.
Yeah. Anything else? I think you mentioned holidays.
Yes. So holidays, they go in great length on their website to explain how Christmas is evil and pagan, how Easter is evil and pagan, how Valentine's Day is evil and pagan, how pretty much any holiday is evil and pagan, and you're supposed to avoid all of those. And here's another thing. You can't say the word holiday.
Really?
Because the word holiday has some kind of tie to the word Satan in Hebrew. So Satan's name, Halel, in Hebrew.
Okay.
So like I said, you can't say sun. So for example, if you're wearing sunglasses, I always made a joke about it. I was like, well, what am I supposed to say? I'm wearing the greater luminary orb glasses. You know? Like, because you can't say sun, so how do you explain sunglasses? You know, and people are like, well, you can just call them shades. Well, I was like, well, shades are considered evil spirits. You know? So, like, am I wearing evil spirits? You know?
I love it. I like the way your mind works.
Yeah.
So I don't want to spend the whole time talking about doctrine, but is there anything else that you want to bring up about doctrine that before we move on?
Well, I just encourage everybody to basically go and check it out because there's so much, Don't get caught up in the way they try and suck you in, but just go there and have your guard up and just look at through all their teachings. They have teachings about Hitler being the Antichrist, going to be the physical body of the Antichrist. They believe that the sun is a space station for UFOs and aliens. They believe that outer space is essentially a big bubble of water and that stars are bubbles. They believe in geocentric model versus the heliocentric model. There's so much different teachings on there that are so different that it just will blow your mind. So we won't get into details about it, but definitely go check it out and just be careful as you examine through it.
Yeah, that's some weird, wild stuff. I did glance through the website, the frequently asked questions page, and some of the other pages, and there's so much on there. It's pretty overwhelming, and a lot of it is very bizarre. So, how does this group view itself as being uniquely chosen by God? Is there any kind of evidence that they provide to say that they are special?
Yeah, so there's a couple things on the website, but one thing I would like to share, I'm going to read an excerpt from there. On the frequently asked questions page, it says, "Are you a sect of the Nazarene?" And I want you to pay very close attention to the words that the website founder uses here. And I'm going to try and highlight these words as we go along, and it's going to be brief. But his answer is this. When he's asked, "Are you a sect of the Nazarene?" he says, "This is the name of a group founded by James Trim. We aren't with them. We, however, do appreciate the general contribution Dr. Trim has made with his research. We do not understand why he and many similar groups decide to call the group they found with derogatory names found in Scripture." And then I'm going to skip ahead here. In the very next sentence, it says, "We believe Yahweh has reserved the true name of the faith, known as the Way of Yahweh, for us being this particular group, just as he reserved," meaning Yahweh, "the domain names we use for us to honor him." So I don't know if you catch that, but in here he's talking about people who have founded other groups, and how this particular group, meaning their group,
right,
is technically founded by Yahweh.
Right.
And it's the proof of this is that they have domain names they can use to honor him.
Yeah, interesting. So they don't have a human leader. They don't have a human founder. Their founder is Almighty.
But they do have a human leader, and they do have, eldership and all this stuff that introduces these things. But to make it not seem like a cult, they always make it very obvious that it has to do with the Creator Yahweh.
Right. Groups like this, when they make statements like that, because it's very common, don't realize how cultish that sounds. When you make the claim that God chose our group, and that's why we're special, that's a pretty big red flag.
Yes, exactly.
All right. Now, would you be willing to share a little bit of your religious background before you joined this group?
Yes, okay, so as far as my beliefs, I'll just say a worldview or a paradigm of reality. I grew up my mother was not a Christian, right? She was kind of a Christian, but kind of not. She was more spiritual. She believed in God and angels and afterlife and all that stuff, but she never really went to church or anything. So growing up, I was kind of agnostic. Like, I felt like there was more to reality than what meets the eye, but I didn't know. And I was never taught like the Bible or anything like that.
Sure.
But I had a few spiritual experiences, I guess you could say, that kind of made me start researching at a young age. And very interestingly enough, what happened was a church had opened up right across the street from where we were living at the time. And my mom would walk back and forth to the grocery store, And every time she would come back, the pastor would be out there mowing the lawn or just hanging out or whatever. Essentially, he convinced her to start going to the church. She convinced me to start going to the church. And so I got baptized. I started doing a lot of good things, mission works. We went to Kansas City, Missouri. We went to North Dakota, doing all this stuff. So I got really indoctrinated in Christianity. And started reading the Bible and started wrapping my worldview around that.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's kind of what happened before I got involved into this group. But there was a particular event that caused me to leave the church and eventually find this group.
Well, let's talk about that a little bit. What led to you joining this new group, the Way of Yahweh?
As I became more mature, I guess, in my belief in Christianity, in 2012, my mother had ended up dying. And it was just me and her living together pretty much my entire life. And when she had passed away, it was essentially a suicide, whether it be accidental or not. It was a drug overdose. And so it was very traumatic for me.
Yes.
And what that trauma did for me is it essentially made me question everything. So I had to re-question why I believe what I believe. And I wanted to learn more. Like, okay, if Christianity is really the truth, I need to know everything, every nook, every cranny. So I started researching the scriptures, researching everything, wanting to get to know more about God, more about the Bible. And I started to see things in there that were errors. And one of the particular doctrines that I struggled with was the doctrine of hell, eternal hellfire. I started noticing in Revelations it talks about hell will be casted into the lake of fire, and they teach that hell is forever. And there's just many other things. People were saying my mom shot right up to heaven, and I was like, where in the Bible does it say that? So I eventually started researching online, and I came across a video on YouTube called Jesus is the Antichrist. And I didn't think anything of it. I thought it was a joke. So I just clicked it just out of curiosity. And next thing I know, I'm at this website and I'm researching it. And I'm contacting the guy, the website we're talking about here. And he seemed to have all the answers to all my questions. He made it logical for every single question I had. And so it really drew me in because there was all the answers I was looking for. And that's how I kind of got involved with this group.
So in the eyes of the group, would these events leading up to you joining have been perceived as some kind of direction from Holy Spirit or angelic direction? Or
So yeah, here's one thing they use in explaining that, because we can't use the word divine. There's a lot of, it's so hard. We speak English, but the English language is so corrupted that there's so many words you can't use. But I'm just going to use words that make sense to me. But you know what I mean? So in their eyes, Yahweh had chosen me to be a part of his remnant, to be 144,000 out of everybody who existed. And that he chose me to find this website, to contact them, and to be in this group, that it was by his divine choosing that I was part of this group. And one thing they used is when I first got involved in the church and I started reading about the 144,000, I had prayed to God that I would be part of this 144,000. Now, the funny thing is later when I got involved in this group, they started saying that God is another word for Satan, and all this other stuff. So they discredit all your spiritual experiences you had outside of this group. So I found it funny that even though I prayed to God about this, they still said it was inspired by Yahweh, although God is Satan, just another name for Satan.
Well, clearly Yahweh could see something in your heart and knew to draw you.
Exactly, yeah, exactly. That's what they say.
So here's a question. You are obviously at a very vulnerable time in your life, and I'm very sorry for your loss. I'm sorry you went through that trauma.
Yeah.
But let's say that when you were starting to question some basic Christian doctrine and you just experienced this extreme trauma, let's say a Jehovah's Witness knocked on your door and had logical answers for every question that you asked. Do you think it would have been just as easy for you to get into that organization?
Hands down, I would have jumped into that full force. No questions asked. If they were to logically present an illogical answer to every question I had, I would have gone full force. If they would have opened me with loving arms and all that good stuff, that's when you're so vulnerable like that.
Yeah.
That's what you're really searching for. And so if they would have filled that void, I would have gone full force with them.
Right.
No, it's not, and that goes for any group, Mormons, any group at all that would have embraced me and had answers that the church didn't have for me at that time. I would have gone full force for it.
Yeah. What I find remarkable is that this church is able to gain recruits without having a physical place for fellowship.
Yep.
This is all online?
It's all online, and you know what they say? It's all, you are chosen by Yahweh. Yahweh is guiding you to this group.
Yeah.
Right? Because there's people all over the world. There's people we're fellowshipping in Africa, all over the world.
Yeah, I noticed there's a little map that shows the world and has little dots for where all the members are across the world.
Yeah. So there's people all over the world, and it's by divine appointment that we are all just gathered online because we're the scattered 144,000 across the world,
Sure.
So we're only going to be united together when the Savior returns.
Sure.
You see?
I find it a little scary and kind of discouraging, actually, because when I think of the internet, I think of it as the bane of cults. The fact that now we have access to information and people can research Joseph Smith before they become a Mormon. They can research the false prophecies of Jehovah's Witnesses before they become a Jehovah's Witness.
Exactly.
And here you have the exact opposite thing happening, that we're seeing the internet being used as a tool to draw people into this thing. And it doesn't seem like there's a whole lot of stuff negative on the internet about this group yet. So I guess it's a good thing we're doing this. Like I said about informed consent with the military, if people want to join these groups with informed consent, so be it. If somebody knows the history of Jehovah's Witnesses and still wants to join, so be it. But we need to have information out there, so I'm really glad you're doing this.
Yeah, as far as I know, this is I'm the only one who's actually came out and spoke somewhat against this group, if you will, because it's been around since 1999.
Okay.
And so as far as I know, but it's had people come and go, but I've never seen anything on the internet or elsewhere of people actually explaining their experience after leaving, because many people have been kicked out before.
Sure. Do you have an estimate for how many members there are worldwide?
To be honest with you, in the closed convocation, and so in the little closed secret group, I would say there's probably roughly only about 80.
Oh,
80
really?
people.
Wow.
Yeah. But in the open groups, it would probably altogether be around a couple hundred.
Okay. So they got a ways to go before they fill out that 144,000, huh?
Yes, and one thing they use is they say it's the 144,000 and their families. But if your family's not a believer, you're not allowed to really get close with them. They're not your true family.
Sure.
So it's contradictory if you ask me.
Okay, so next question here. When you joined the group, did it have an effect on your relationships with the friends you had before joining and with your family members?
Yeah, so essentially it drove me farther away from the Christian church I was involved in. Right? So the pastor had sat me down and told me, look, be careful, you get involved in all this other stuff. And it just drove me farther away from them. It made me believe that holidays are an abomination to the Creator. So I stopped all holidays. I stopped going to family events, holidays, basically just really isolated myself. I stopped hanging out with a lot of my Christian friends because I felt like, there was a divide between me and them, because over here I'm in the truth and they're not. And so I felt like there's kind of like this disconnect. And so essentially I disfellowshipped with my own family and friends because I was really getting trained, if you will, in this group.
Yeah, and the objections that you had maybe from members in your church or from family, did that feel like persecution at the time?
It did, and that's another thing that a lot of these cult groups use is persecution is a sign that they are the truth.
Right, it's a confirmation.
But everybody gets persecuted. Jehovah's Witnesses get persecuted, yet they have different views than this group has. This group gets persecuted. They have different views than the Mormons have. The Mormons get persecuted, yet they're all in the truth, but it can't be because they're all contradictory.
Exactly. Very well said. What led up to you leaving the organization?
Questioning. The short answer is questioning. They don't like that.
I hear you.
So, there was a couple times, actually, where I had gotten disfellowshipped, but I've always came back.
Do they actually use that word, disfellowship?
They do not. They consider it like a pruning, and they use some scriptures to be like, well, we're just pruning you, or a scripture says to cut this member off, all these things like that. So I had ended up leaving, but the thing is, okay, so you had the traumatic event that took place with my mother, right? And that sparked a host of mental health issues, panic attacks, PTSD, I was having flashbacks, all that stuff. And this group teaches you're not allowed to do blood transfusions, you're not allowed to donate blood, you're not allowed to take psychotropic medications, so anything for mental health. But I was starting to deteriorate so much because my worldview was changing, that not only that, and the trauma, that I sought help through therapy and medications. And to them, this led to me being demon-possessed. And so every time I would question something, or every time I would bring up evidence that went against the core teachings, we would have a dialogue, but eventually they would, I guess the word is character bashing. They would make me out to look like a bad guy.
Sure. Because the group is perfect. The group can't be at fault. The doctrine can't be at fault, so it must be you.
Yeah, so if you're going against the teachings that are inspired by Yahweh himself, you're going against Yahweh, and therefore we need to do something about you. So I was actually quarantined for a couple months, and that made things worse because I felt so alone and abandoned, and I gave up my family and friends, and all I had this group, and now they quarantine me, and I'm not allowed to fellowship with them. So what can I do to get right with these guys so I can get back?
Right.
Like, you always want to go back because you feel like that's all you have. They make it to where that's all you have.
This is a great way to kind of give a window into what spiritual abuse is. Mm-hmm. When you think of an abusive mate, a husband who beats his wife and then says, I'm sorry, and there's always that communicating that idea that no one else would want you, and I'm the only one who really loves you, and the wife always feels like she's got to stick with him and come back and let him come back, and that's exactly what this is. It's an abusive relationship.
Yeah.
How are those who? So talk a little bit more about leaving. What actually led to the final? I'm done with this.
Okay, so what led to the final being done with this is I had always wondered, how does birth defects fit into our view of reality in this group? And so I had made a post in one of the groups about two conjoined twins that I found on the BBC News, and it looks so surreal, and like they're conjoined and all this stuff. And I was like, how does this fit into our worldview? And then immediately they felt that as a threat. So they had a whole list of everything. And to sum it up, basically they concluded that Satan is the one that thrust our soul into our flesh. And so our soul being put into flesh is a punishment. And so these conjoined twins is the doing of Satan, basically, and all this stuff. And then once they got done explaining that, they went ahead and character bashed me and said, Brother Danny, we have this picture of you. Can we show you what we found? And I said, sure, yeah, go ahead. And so they made a video, and they kept it private, thank goodness, because it was just totally bashing who I am. And they basically photoshopped it to show where I have all these demons all over my face and everything, and how this is a very bad thing. And so eventually, they're like, you need to repent, you need to cry to Yahweh, you need to get right, get off these medications, all these things. And I was like, well, you know what? I've seen you character bash people before. I've seen how this plays out. You know, this time I'm just done. So I took the initiative and basically left and said, I can't do this anymore. Because I've seen this happen, Daniel. I've seen this happen with other people.
Yeah.
In this group before. But these other people end up having panic attacks and all this stuff. And I had those too, but they always find a way to come back.
Right.
They want to come back. At this point, I said, I've seen this group follows the leadership, and it looks to the leadership, and it's not really following Yahweh as they claim. So I'm done. And that's kind of what happened to me this last, 4 or 5 months ago, and I was just kind of completely done.
Yeah, well, I give you a lot of credit. How are people that leave, like you, who really leave, how are they viewed by the group?
Heretics, they're viewed as essentially non-believers. They're viewed as near to a curse. They're told to disfellowship with them. The people in the group are told to disfellowship with them. And so you block them on Facebook. And if you happen to still be friends with somebody, they'll go through your friends list and see that you're still friends with someone who's been kicked out. And then they'll kind of hound you about it, keep pushing you, and why are you still friends with this person? Until you finally block them. So you're essentially considered a heathen or a non-believer, a heretic, all those things, and people in the group are not allowed to fellowship with you, or they're encouraged not to fellowship with you. And here's one point I want to make really briefly, is that they say you're allowed to think for yourself. They say you're supposed to follow Yahweh, right? But it's like bowling, and we talked about this before the interview. And so they're like, you can think for yourself, but think within these bumpers. If you start getting over to these sides, we're going to smack you back. And so you can only think within what we have. Read our translation only. Read our website only. Everything else is poisonous to your spirit. Don't go out there. Read only our stuff.
Yeah. I think it's important to just make sure that is clear, that they have their own translation.
They do. Yeah. In their translation, they go to the book of Enoch and find a section in Enoch where it talks about something about translation of scriptures, and they say that that's proof that this is referring to their scriptures only. Every other scripture is fallacy, so you have to go by their translation. And their translation will twist scriptures to make it where it shows that you have to pronunciate the names properly in the scriptures. But it doesn't, if you go back to the original words, it doesn't always say that. You have to do twisting to make it say that. And there's a verse in the Bible where it says, you cannot love money and love God, I don't know which verse that is exactly, but they twisted to say you cannot follow God or Yahweh, for you either love one and hate the other. So they take that word, which is used for money, and make it God. So if you're a Christian, you read the scripture, which is holy, and you see, oh, I can't worship God like I was as a Christian. I had to worship God.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying?
Fascinating.
Yes.
Is there anything that you would like to say to people who are still in this group?
Yeah. The key thing I want to say to anybody who's still in this group and that may be watching this video is don't be afraid to question. Don't be afraid to go out and research on your own. Don't be afraid of being excluded from the groups. Don't have that fear that you have to please Yahushua and Allah Shiva. Realize that it is your personal journey that is guiding you, and you don't have to be afraid of people. And that's the key point, is don't fear. And I would also want to encourage people to not jump on the bandwagon with character bashing because of the fear of not being on board with everyone else. And so I just encourage everyone to not be afraid. Do not jump on the bandwagon to character bash other people who are being excluded from the group just because you want to be seen among this group and be with this group, if that makes sense.
Yeah, very well said. The two names that you mentioned, is that the husband and wife team that kind of lead the group?
Yep.
And would you say that that's the true leader of this organization?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Very fair. Do you have any advice for people who have experienced loss like you did and are looking for answers?
Yes. The biggest thing that I've learned, and if you can learn from my mistakes, is to understand that trauma and loss is a part of life. And at that time, when you're going through that, you feel so empty, you have such a huge void, and you try and fill that void, whether it be with drugs, whether it be with religion. And I just encourage you to seek professional help if that's what you need, and to not give in to the first person who comes your way and says, I have all the answers, follow me. But to let it play its role and to have patience and understand that this is a natural process of life. And it does get better. And you can seek professional help. Don't let anyone tell you you can't. And that would be my advice for people who suffer from loss. And also, if anybody who watches your videos has suffered loss and has had any issues with cults or anything, they can always email me too. And if you want to put my email on here, that'd be great.
Yeah, I'll put it on the screen. What is the address?
So it's DJ Oberg, Oberg, at outlook.com.
Okay.
And so if anyone has ever experienced loss or suicide of a loved one and is feeling very vulnerable, they can always contact me, and I can kind of share my experience in more depth with them.
Thank you for that. Would you like to plug your YouTube channel?
Yes, certainly. So I've started a new YouTube channel. Before I had a YouTube channel where I was doing a lot of ministry work for the group I was in. This new YouTube channel I have now is basically about soul journeying, about finding, it's more of a philosophical deal about finding your path in life and your meaning in life, and kind of sharing my experiences as I'm leaving that group and as I'm going forward. So it'd be very, very good if people were to subscribe to my channel and just follow me and see where it kind of leads. So I would definitely like that to be added in here as well.
Yeah, I'll put it in the description below. Is it okay if I put the one about cognitive dissonance down there?
Yes, because cognitive dissonance, I believe, is one of the most horrible things anyone can go through. I don't wish it on my worst enemy. And when it's prolonged, it is torturous.
Right on.
So definitely put that one in there, yes.
Yeah, so subscribe to Danny's channel. And
Yes.
I really thank you for taking the time to do this. I really enjoyed it. You're very insightful. And I think a lot of the things that you said are going to resonate with a lot of people from a lot of different groups. Hopefully there are some people watching this that are from the group you came out of. But whoever is watching this, I think will appreciate your story and find value in it. So thank you for taking the time to do it.
No problem.
All right, have a good one.
You too.